Think about someone you know who's completely absent from social media. No posts, no stories, and no accounts. Their digital footprint is completely blank. Usually, we assume this absence is a deficit, a lack of digital literacy, or perhaps a sign of depression and social isolation. But refusing to post can be an active, deliberate behavioral stance, rather than a passive failure to participate. Examining this choice forces us to look at the psychological costs the rest of us accept every time we broadcast our lives. The non-poster suggests a different way of managing psychological resources, trading digital presence for a more private form of self-preservation. To understand this choice, we have to establish the baseline of normal usage. Standard posting is a system built on external validation loops and the constant curation of identity. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania sought to quantify the psychological toll of these specific validation loops. This graph shows that when platform usage is capped at just 10 minutes per day, there is a significant reduction in both depression and loneliness. That 10-minute limit is the clinical ideal, but it stands in stark contrast to the endless scrolling and posting that define the average user's day. This presents a clear choice between a social life fueled by external metrics and one governed by internal self-determination. The primary psychological driver behind digital posting is impression management, and this creates the paradox of authenticity, where the awareness of an audience transforms a genuine human moment into a calculated performance. Every post requires micro-decisions, capturing, curating, captioning, while analyzing optimal timing. These decisions accumulate, increasing cognitive load and triggering decision fatigue. Compare that to the non-poster's pathway, where the process moves directly from experience to internal memory. By terminating the process at the point of experience, they bypass that mental fatigue entirely. This is digital minimalism, using platforms as functional utilities rather than performative stages. For some, this silence stems from social anxiety and a fear of evaluation. For others, it is an intentional choice. Regardless of the motivation, both groups experience a significant reduction in daily mental friction. Refusing the cognitive tax of impression management allows the individual to preserve their mental bandwidth for unmediated experiences. The next layer involves Leon Festinger's social comparison theory. Festinger noted that human beings have a biological drive to evaluate their own standing by comparing themselves to their peers. Algorithmic feeds hypercharge this biological drive, subjecting us to a continuous, aggressive onslaught of comparative data every time we scroll. This creates a mechanical trap. We are forced to compare our unedited, mundane reality against the algorithmically sorted highlight reels of others. The gap between these two baselines is a primary source of chronic social envy. Non-posters neutralize this envy by severing the broadcast loop entirely. However, passive consumption, scrolling without posting, still triggers these comparison mechanisms. The most resilient non-posters also limit their intake to protect their mental baseline. Opting out of the digital arena is a systemic defense against engineered envy. To understand the core of this behavior, we look to self-determination theory. This theory identifies three basic needs for human stability: a need for competence, a need for connection, and a need for autonomy. Most digital users attempt to fulfill the needs for connection and competence through engagement metrics. Non-posters fulfill those same needs entirely offline, through deep relationships and unbroadcasted work. This high level of internal stability removes the requirement for an external audience. The result is a prioritization of sacred privacy. Broadcasting an intimate moment to a massive network often dilutes the experience, spreading the emotional weight too thin. Non-posters keep their experiences concentrated within a highly restricted loop of people. By limiting the audience, they preserve the authenticity and exclusivity of the memory. What looks like a blank digital footprint is often a marker of internal psychological security. We can synthesize these traits into a comparative profile of the poster versus the non-poster. First, the validation source. The poster looks to external data, while the non-poster relies on internal satisfaction. Their visibility strategy also differs, moving from broad broadcast to exclusive intimacy. Finally, their cognitive baseline moves from high mental load to stabilized bandwidth. The non-poster is not missing out. They are optimizing for mental longevity. But remember the vulnerability, the passive consumption trap. Constant scrolling still subjects the brain to comparison loops, even if you never hit post. We live in a culture of immense pressure to perform, to document, and to validate every single moment. Against that pressure, the lifestyle of the non-poster is quiet and insulated. Digital silence is an act of psychological self-preservation. A life lived fully does not need an